What is metadata? Well, the definition is data about data. This isn't really helpful. So I'd like you to think of metadata as a descriptor of your content, maybe as an attribute. Have you looked at your driver's license lately, your passport? That is a piece of content, and that content has pieces of metadata. Those pieces of metadata might be your social security number, your date, your height, unfortunately your weight also. These are attributes that help different organizations identify who you are. And this is how important it can be for your organization to use these attributes, or metadata, across different pieces of content. Why would you want to do this? Because using these pieces of metadata allows you to reuse content across your organization for multiple purposes. It's not only one item, but actually you can do your work and create live status reports. Imagine if you have one single task list that you're updating on a regular basis, and your boss would like to know what you've been working on. There you go. You automatically have a report that says, maybe between this time and a few days later, what you had accomplished. No more emails to your boss, no more Word documents separate to the work that you've been doing. You've just done your work and you've created live status reports. It saves time. Also, another thing that is powerful within SharePoint 2010 and 2013 is the use of metadata allows for enhancements in search, because your site owner and site administrators can actually use this metadata to refine search and give you better results and find information more quickly when these attributes are added. Also, a much more advanced thing that metadata allows you to do is to roll up information across sites. Imagine if you had many projects across your organization. If you have metadata that is the same across documents, let's say meeting minutes, you'd be able to roll up all of the meeting minutes into one single location so that anyone can find every meeting minute from a project across the entire organization. That's great, you say, but why would I actually use metadata? Especially within document libraries where I've just been putting it in my file folder and I can find it because I have labeled my folders many different ways, and I know exactly how to find things. Let's take a look at a comparison between folders and metadata. I prefer metadata, but there are times that a folder is a good choice. What if I said a folder is the equivalent of a refrigerator? So, you know what goes in the refrigerator. You know actually the physical location of the refrigerator. But what else do you know? Well, this is the main reason that I like to use metadata. Because when you use metadata, you also get that refrigerator. But on top of the refrigerator, what you get is what shelf is an item in? Who owns that item? And when you're talking about a refrigerator, it's very important to know if that item is perishable, right? So compared to one single value that you get in a folder, you'd be able to apply these attributes to, let's say it's that wonderful piece of salami in there, and say, what shelf is it stored in? Whose is it? Is it your uncle's? And if it's perishable, when's the date that it will expire? So you might have to throw it out. This is information that you would have to normally open a document up in a folder to find out. Now it's readily available for you. Also in SharePoint, you can take any of these attributes and create a view. In addition, there's something called content types. Now this is a very advanced feature, but I want to introduce you to the concept, because if you start small and start using metadata slowly and add attributes and descriptors to your information, you could later on apply content types. What are these content types? Well, part of it is the metadata that you have applied to a document. On top of that, it is the actual template of the document that could be centrally controlled. Here, I've shown an example of different training documents that you might have. I might have the lab presentation, the video script, the just general document, and each of these items, just like your identification through a passport or through a driver's license, has a lot of the same information, but might have some different. Another very valuable part of why SharePoint in general has become such a powerful tool is that with these content types, you can actually apply a workflow directly. Let's say that if I create a presentation, it needs to go through a 3-straight workflow, and there's a process for review. Well, SharePoint can do that out of the box. So, applying the metadata in a specific template, I know the work process that I need to do. There's even a more advanced piece here called information management that if I want to delete this document after a certain amount of time or treat it in a certain way, I can drive rules all through this one little content type. So, start small, use metadata, and slowly you can grow up into this content type and all of the powerful features that are within SharePoint. Let's show you how to get started. The first way to add metadata is by adding a column. In SharePoint, there are many different types of columns. The first type is a single line of text. This is usually the title column, a short value of information that you need to collect, compared to multiple lines of text that, if you want to cut and paste, you should keep as plain text. Or you can go to rich text, where you can add images, hyperlinks, and have a lot of different flexibility with what you put into that text area. There are, of course, number, date and time, person or group, where you're pulling directly from your Active Directory list. And this is a really great column to use if you want to power and use workflows to notify people directly. Also, you can add hyperlinks and pictures directly into descriptors of your content, just to name a few. Two other ones that are very powerful and that allow you to control values from a central location are the choice and lookup fields. A choice field is where you enter in data and a controlled vocabulary that you've decided on. So, for example, let's take a status. Well, it's new, it's draft, and it's complete. And you can change that around however you want. You've set those values, and now your users are able to choose those different ones. A more advanced field is called a lookup, and it's shown in the example above. You actually can reference another list within SharePoint, for example, a calendar, select the column title, and then a great feature that was introduced in SharePoint 2010 and continues in SharePoint 2013 is when you pull the lookup value of the title, you also can display other fields within that reference list. This is a really great tool to be able to have a parent-child relationship, let's say state and country, and you can get the different pieces of information from the parent into the child, the state. Also, want to highlight some best practices when you're creating columns. No spaces, because if you ever want to go into the back end and edit these columns using SharePoint Designer, spaces will have created text just like in the URL, like %20 or other placeholders for underlines and special characters. So it's best practice not to use spaces and then go back and change the column name after it's been created. Also, be specific when naming. I can't tell you how many places I've been where there is a field called category that means several different things in several different places. Yes, a status column might be different for different things, but even that, if you can, I highly recommend taking the time to name it specifically for the library or list that you're using it for. That way, you get the benefits of metadata across the different sites that we discussed earlier before. You'll be able to directly compare them to each other, compared to if you had the single name meaning different things in different places. Let's take a look at how we add columns. We've come to the task list within the Power User site to take a look at how to add a column and all of the different column values that a task list uses. In SharePoint 2013, there are actually 3 different ways to add a column. The easiest is to use the List tab and create a column. The other way that was most commonly used in SharePoint 2010 was to go into List Settings, and then go into Columns and add a column. But now we'll go back to the main part of the list and show you a new way in SharePoint 2013. In SharePoint 2013, when you edit a list, there's a little plus value and you can add a column directly in the Edit List mode. Here you can see you can immediately add a simple column without having to go directly into the column editing form. Let's add a text just for the fun of it. There you go. As easy as that, I've now added a column. So this could be good or bad, because if you have the right permissions, you can do it quickly and not necessarily have taken the thought that should be put into adding a column. This is great, but be careful. Now let's take a review by doing the same plus and look at that column adding form. Here you can see SharePoint 2013 is very similar to SharePoint 2010 and 2007. You can choose the column name. Remember, the best practice would be to not use any spaces. Now that we have a name, we can select the different type, single line of text. Notice what just happened? Different values came up under the additional column settings. For text, you're allowed to choose if the column is required, if it enforces unique values, and the total number of characters. A nice feature that SharePoint allows you to do also is create a default value. This reduces the need for your users to enter an initial value when they first use this list or library. Let's scroll back up and see the different settings for the different columns. For multiple lines of text, you're able to switch from plain text, which enables you to copy and paste directly from the edit value, or enhanced rich text. And this lets you do a little bit of anything. And it's a really high value if you're trying to record notes or use hyperlinks within your list or library. Also, another feature is if you have versioning on, you're able to track when items were added into this text box by appending changes to the existing text. You'll also notice that you're able to select the number of lines for editing, and this really is just the default display. If you continue typing, it will add additional lines. Choice is the ability to type your own values into a column. You can see here that SharePoint provides 3 initial values that you can change. Also, you're able to display it as a drop-down, select as a radio button, or allow multiple selections using checkboxes. A drop-down is used when you have values usually within a process or there are a large number. Radio buttons are best used when there's only a few choices. And checkboxes are descriptors that you might have multiple. Also, if you're feeling lucky, you can allow people to fill in choices. This is great to add flexibility, but also you have to have some level of management to be able to go in and check that people are using the correct spelling and entering in proper values into your list. Number allows for minimum and maximum numbers allowed, and even you can calculate a value. This too could be shown as a percentage if you wanted to show, for example in a task list, percentage complete. There is even a specific column for currency. While almost exactly the same as the number list, it will format it specifically as a currency of your choice. Finally, let's take a look at 2 more, the lookup and the person column. In the column settings for a lookup, you're able to choose the list that you'll be receiving information from. Let's say supporting documents in here. You'll see then that the form changes and shows the columns that are actually within that specific supporting documents list. You can select the specific column to be your key value, and then you can also pull in other values of that single list. Finally, let's take a look at person or group. Here, you're able to allow for multiple selections, decide if you want to just allow for the selections of groups or people only. Also, if you're in a specific part of your process or only a smaller group of people are allowed to be assigned tasks, you could take those permission groups and assign specifically what people within those groups can be chosen while using this list. Also, for the people, there are a few different display choices. My favorite is Name with Presence. The presence is the connection between Microsoft Link and Outlook being able to IM, email, and contact the person instantaneously. However, showing the pictures is a really nice way to also connect with the actual user. Now that we've gone through different sorts of columns, let's take a look at how the task list actually uses different columns. Here you can see in the task list that there is a percent complete, which is a number, assigned to, which is that person or group, completed, which is a calculation based on other columns. Basically, when you change the status to completed, it automatically fills out. Created, that is a SharePoint native column that you don't need to add. It's automatically added. Description, which is that multiple line of text. Many date and times for due date, meeting, and modified. And predecessors, which is really interesting. because it's actually a lookup column on the task list itself. This way you can connect two tasks together to know which task comes first. In SharePoint 2013, this is also allowing you to sync your task list with Office Project and be able to manipulate the predecessors in that system. Finally, let's take a look at the task status field. And notice first that it's specifically named task status, not to be confused with the status of a document or any other type of item, and there are values that SharePoint pre-enters into the choice columns. Also notice that these choices are shown in a drop-down menu and the default value is not started. Now we've seen the three different ways to add a column to a list or a library and the powerful different types that can be added to those lists and libraries to create solutions for your organization.